This is a Nice Guys Patreon exclusive.
It's another Ice Guys team season preview video, 32 teams in 32 days. Ian Cameron, Alex B. Smith with you, and we are talking Detroit Red Wings for this team preview video. And the Detroit Red Wings are a team that has been close but no cigar as far as Stanley Cup playoff appearance is concerned the last few years. Another season last year where the Red Wings fall short of making the playoffs, looking to obviously make amends for that here this year. When you look at the Red Wings finishing 86 points, only ahead of two teams in the Atlantic Division, that being Buffalo and Boston, and only ahead of three teams in the other Eastern Conference Division, the Metro, the Islanders, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, all non-playoff teams. So Detroit has had issues getting over the hump, making the playoffs. Of course, now it'll be interesting to see how this season unfolds for them because there's a lot of holes that we've seen in this team. Most of them have been as far as goal prevention is concerned. You know, that's where the biggest problems to me have been for the Detroit Red Wings. Now, of course, they made an in-season coaching change last year. Derek Lalonde was shown the door, and Todd McClellan, who was an assistant coach with Mike Babcock many years ago with this Red Wings franchise. He took over as head coach. And yes, there was instant, immediate success, certainly when he took over. We saw the run that the Red Wings put together, but they were not able to sustain it down the stretch enough to be able to make it as far as the Stanley Cup playoffs are concerned. So this becomes a very important year. You know, more so, Tom McClellan, this is only going to be his first full season with the Red Wings. Remember, of course, hired in season last year. This is a big season for Steve Yzerman, the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings, because this is a guy that is, beloved in Detroit, going back to obviously his playing days, all the Stanley Cups, being the captain, just the way he carried himself as a player and person. But even Red Wings fans that they adore Steve Yzerman, and even they are starting to get impatient and starting to criticize him and starting to give him, a little bit of grief for some of the moves and some of the maybe non-moves that he has made in recent years to help get this team to take that final step into the Stanley Cup playoffs. This year, when it comes down to it, I've always said about the Red Wings, now, their scoring did decrease a little bit last year, but not to the point where they still scored enough goals that they probably should have been able to win some games. They still averaged, a decent amount as far as goals per game are concerned. And when you look at the makeup of the forward group, when you've got a top six that's comprised of Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin, the captain, Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane, who still has showed he's got some gas left in the tank. Casper, the friendly betting ghost, who was one of our favorite player prop guys last year. Marco Casper, you got a breakout offensive season from him, no question about it. You're going to have options in your bottom six, too, as far as Compher, City of Compher. Jonathan Berggren is a guy that played on a bottom six role but could still chip in offensively for you. They have JVR, the veteran now, on this hockey team to really help them along the bottom six. And that's what he is now at this stage of his career, JVR, more of a bottom six forward type of player, but still someone that can chip in and help you out. I think there's still ability for this team to have a good power play. There's still ability for this team to score goals. But again, the improvements are going to have to be keeping the puck out of the freaking net, as I always like to say. And when you look at the Detroit Red Wings, that's where a lot of their issues have been in the last few years. It's really been to their detriment as far as not making the playoffs. Last year, 3.16 goals per game allowed, just a little bit too much for my liking. And again, this blue line for the Detroit Red Wings with Mo Seider, who can skate, big guy. I don't think plays physical as much as he should for a guy of his size. And to be honest with you, I was alarmed by the defensive issues he had at times and some of the miscues we'd see from Mo Seider in his own zone. Simon Edvinsson is a player that, again, good skating ability, moves the puck very well. There's still, and I thought actually as a defender, there were times he eclipsed Seider last year as far as his play defensively, but still a work in progress. And then you've got just a bunch of question marks and a bunch of meandering defense. I like Ben Sherratt, but he's mostly going to be a stay-at-home physical defenseman. Albert Johansson. And then you got an Eric Gustafsson and Justin Hall, as it stands right now, possibly being your third pair. That's just not a good NHL third pair defense score or third pair at a defenseman at all, those two. I think you could do a lot better than that, obviously. And then when you look at the depth, you've got William Lagesson, you've got Jacob Bernard Docker, who used to be with the Ottawa Senators organization, and Travis Hamonic, who, I hate to say this, he's had a long career, but he's had a shit ton of injuries. Probably one more injury away from hanging up the skates and calling it a career. So what are you going to get from him in a depth defenseman role? But there's still some issues and some question marks that I have about the Detroit Red Wings as far as their blue line is concerned. Now, the big move that Steve Yzerman made to fix the goals against, fix this team defensively, make them a team that's not going to give up as many goals this year is obviously goaltending. He went out and he got John Gibson. And John Gibson has been in trade rumors for years in his final years with the Anaheim Ducks. Well, he's finally out of Anaheim, and now he's with the Detroit Red Wings. If John Gibson can stay healthy, big if, because he's had one injury after another the last 2 years, he's automatically better than anything that Detroit had last year in net. Talbot, Alex Lyon, Ville Husso, you name it. If you can tell me that John Gibson can stay healthy, he is a better goaltending option to give you that better performance in net and the better ability to help you win hockey games. There's no question about that. But the best ability is availability. And that has always been an issue later in the career here for John Gibson. It seems like lower body injury this, groin injury that. Some kind of injury has bothered him the last few years, and it's concerning because you go back to the 2020 or 2021 season, the last 4 full 82-game seasons that we've had, 56 games played, 53 games played, 46 games played, 29 games played. It's just been a situation where he's been, unable to be there for his team, start to finish. And then if he's hurt and he's out for a period of time, and you've got to rely on Cam Talbot, who, look, let's be honest, it was kind of disappointing from Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot's had some great moments in his career. He's had some shaky ones, and there was probably more mediocrity than good from Cam Talbot last year. That's why it's imperative for Detroit, if they are finally going to get over that hurdle and be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference, they need John Gibson available. They need him available. That's all there is to it. And whether he will be or not is going to be a big question. That's why, for me, Alex, Detroit is, until I see it, until they prove it, this is either bet against, bet under their point total for the season. This is a prove-it team for me, the Detroit Red Wings. Prove it. Prove John Gibson can be the answer. Prove that he can stay healthy. Prove that he can play a majority of your games in between the pipes this year for the Detroit Red Wings. If he does that, and the scoring, and they're able to score the goals that I think they're capable of, then Detroit absolutely can challenge for a playoff spot, and maybe this be the year they finally get into the postseason. But that's still a lot of ifs. And let's be honest with Gibson. You look at the last few years, we talk about his ability to stay healthy, but you look at the numbers as well. 3 of the last 4 seasons, he's had a goals against average at 3.19 or worse. And a save percentage, his highest save percentage was last year, 911. The 3 years before that, he had a 904, 899, 888 save percentage. So there's questions about him playing at the highest level now at this stage of his career, too. Can he get to that, great level as a goaltender? So much of it hinges on him playing well and him staying healthy for this Detroit Red Wings team. And like I said, we've been here before. I've been here before way too many times regarding, this is the year. Detroit's finally in that position where they're going to break through, make the playoffs, have that step-up year. And every time they've let me down. So this is now a prove it before I believe it situation for the Detroit Red Wings, at least in this bettor's opinion. Alex, your thoughts here on the Detroit Red Wings?
Let's start with the goaltending, because that, like I said, it's been the biggest crux for this Detroit Red Wings team in quite some time. And yes, on paper, John Gibson's the best option they've had as a starting goaltender in arguably the last 4 years. But then when you look at John Gibson's numbers, and we can go all the way back to when we started this program, 8 years ago, when John Gibson, we said, was one of the best goaltenders in the world. And his numbers were indicative of a top-tier goalie with a bad franchise that was getting worse. That was the beginning of the end for the Ducks as they started to tank and go into their rebuild, which ended up being a very long rebuild, which he stuck around through, and his numbers suffered as a result of that. And we went from him being one of the best goalies in the world, a bad team, to a often injured mid-range goalie on a bad team. And then that bad team started to get better, but we didn't see his progression rise even close to where his median is, in my opinion. So the change of scenery that we thought he should have had 2 years ago, I don't think it matters at this point now. I think he's a goaltender who's on the wrong side of 30, who's had a lot of injuries, who's been beat up a lot, who, yes, gives Detroit a better option, but he's not so much one of the best options, and he's certainly not the John Gibson of old. And I don't think he's going to be enough to carry this team forward. And certainly Cameron Talbot's a guy who we've seen nothing but him decline year after year after year. And he's a guy you can't rely on in big games. He can't steal you a game. He can't steal you a game in the playoffs anymore. He's just another guy. He's a backup at best, a veteran presence in the locker room, sure. But that's probably all he delivers at this point. And you don't need Cameron Talbot to be the veteran presence in a locker room that has a ton of veterans like Sir Patrick Kane, like Travis Hamonic, like James Van Riemsdyk, like Ben Sherratt, a lot of guys in their late 30s in this locker room. Even John Gibson being 32, but he's been around the block, played 12 seasons now in the NHL. So you have the veteran presence. You need quality veterans at this point if you're Detroit. If you're trying to move ahead in what's an increasingly tougher and tougher Atlantic division, you need guys who can step up and deliver. And there's a lot of question marks, still too many question marks throughout the lineup. He said there's a lot of talented guys who I think are past their prime. Even Patrick Kane, who we saw show some flashes of brilliance last year, 20 goals, 21 goals, 38 assists. But can he keep that up at 36 years of age? Can he, off of having a hip resurfacing procedure, something that we've seen a lot of players have to go through? Can those hips still, keep up? Can he still reach foot speed? That is the biggest part of his game at this point, because he's not going to turn into a two-way wizard. Okay, he's not going to give you that hard defensive game. That's just not part of his style. But is he still the guy who can give you possibly 35, 40 goals in a year? I'm not quite sure. Dylan Larkin has been the heart and soul of this team for a long time, and he did play all 82 games, but he's the guy who, there's still questions about him. He takes a hard hit. He's had concussion issues. He's had seasons where he's, struggled to stay healthy. Can he do that again for a second straight year? I'm not sure. There's too many question marks. I don't have anything as far as futures go, but everything looks to be downward until this team, like you said, can prove that they can win. And the schedule is certainly in their favor. Yes, they do play their first 6 games against teams who made the playoffs, starting with Montreal, the team that kept them out, at home, a home-and-home series against Toronto, and then a home stretch against Florida, Tampa Bay, and Edmonton. So obviously you really get to test your mettle against the toughest teams in the league right off the bat. And then you look into, they have a stretch where they go out west for 5 games, another home-and-home series. Then you have 9 of your next 11 games going all the way into the Thanksgiving break at home. So this is a team that has played well at home, played much better in the pizza box over the last couple of years. This is the time to take advantage of those points, get those important points early in the year. So I think we talk about how the old mantra of saying that, a team knows that they're in or out of the playoffs by American Thanksgiving. That's not really the case these days in the NHL. For the Red Wings, that might be the mark barrier, because if they're playing well in October and November and taking advantage of having this many games at home and beating those top-tier teams early, catching some of those teams maybe sleeping a little bit, then they may be well on their way to finally breaking this playoff drought. But if not, they struggle in those games and then have to try to tread water. And keep in mind, there's a lot of guys here who will be playing the Olympics as well. A lot of guys from Sweden and a lot of guys from Team USA on this lineup. And maybe those things could kind of throw some things into the mix as far as the second half of the season goes for Detroit.
One thing I want to really, I'm not going to usually run to watch a certain team or anything really in preseason. Preseason is what it is, but there usually is something that I'm going to be at least keeping an eye on with the majority of teams as far as position battles are concerned, battling for forward spots or blue line spots. But what I want to see is, and this is a guy we've mentioned a lot regarding the Detroit Red Wings and their system, I want to see Sebastian Cossa here coming up in this preseason and training camp for the Red Wings. He's been knocking on the door for a very long time. They've been very patient. They've been almost hesitant to really give him that first look at the NHL level. But this is a guy that's posted really strong numbers in back-to-back years in Grand Rapids in the American Hockey League. And he is a guy that I think is going to get a good long look from Todd McClellan and the coaching staff here later in September when training camp opens up. And I think he's going to get a decent amount of game action in their preseason games as well. Yeah. I am fascinated to see, could he start the year with the Detroit Red Wings? That's going to be something to watch for. But this is a guy that's been, a thought of prospect for years now in this organization, that just for various circumstances, players in front of him in the organization as far as goaltenders, just being, he's had some ups and downs in the minor league level, but now he has put together two pretty damn solid seasons back to back for a solid, strong body of work at Grand Rapids, to the point where if he's not ready to knock on the door and open the door to the NHL for the first time with the Detroit Red Wings, when will it be? And I'm also hearing rumblings that the Oilers have had scouts looking at Sebastian Cossa for a very, very long time, and maybe looking at maybe a trade to get, if Detroit's still going to, drag their feet with Sebastian Cossa, giving him a shot at the NHL level. I'm hearing the Oilers really like him and might package some kind of a trade offer. Not saying Detroit would pull the trigger on a trade, but Edmonton might offer to Detroit some kind of a trade to get Sebastian Cossa. So there's someone that I'm definitely going to be anxious to keep my eye on here during the upcoming preseason and training camp for the Red Wings.
I posted my initial goalie rankings, of course, on patreon.com. You can check that out as you're watching this video. But I have Sebastian Cossa actually 20 cents behind the starter with Gibson. And then I have Talbot 25 cents below Gibson. So I actually have Cossa ranked a little bit higher. And should we see an injury to Gibson or Talbot, Cossa is a goalie that I certainly would be looking to bet on and find some value with during the regular season if he's called up. So definitely a goalie that I would be watching as well during the preseason and keeping an eye on while he's in Grand Rapids.
And it's a case-by-case basis. I've seen goalies that we well thought of, prospects that, the organization likes, the people that watch him in the American League, have been impressed with the way he's played. And sometimes they come up to the NHL, they fall flat on their face. They're not ready. They struggle. But then there's also those cases like a Jet Greaves with Columbus last year. He just gets that opportunity late down the year, string starts together, and he was awesome for Columbus. And maybe that will be Cossa. That the potential's there for that. So it's definitely an individual case-by-case basis. And like I said, now you don't have that too many cooks in the kitchen goaltending room anymore. The problem with the cooks in the kitchen goaltending room last year is it's a bunch of mediocre cooks that were burning the food half the time. That's the problem. It's one of these deals with Husso and Talbot and Lyon. Now you're going to have, Gibson, Talbot, but there's an opening for a third, and Cossa could get that spot.
And it was just so strange for them to create that logjam when they didn't have to. When you have Cossa, who's still a very young guy, but has shown enough talent to at least, in my opinion, be a backup at the NHL level. You have Trey Augustin in the organization down in Michigan State. So you have the pipeline for the future. Why are you dealing with guys like Cameron Talbot when you're trying to make the playoffs now? You're not going to have Dylan Larkin forever. You're not going to have Patrick Kane forever. You're not going to have Alex DeBrincat forever. So why ruin the time you have with these core guys offensively with mediocre goaltending? And you have someone who is you're not paying millions and millions of dollars to, who can maybe steal you. We've seen rookies throughout the years come through and step up right away for NHL teams. The most notable of the recent memory is Jordan Bennington. And I said that last year when they were going through the race. Why not give this Cossa kid a shot? And maybe he breaks through. No one has any real tape on him. And maybe he could have been the guy to steal you some wins and get you in the postseason last year. So it's just really weird to see, like I said, how hesitant they've been to bring him along officially up with the big club.
It's been too patient almost. For the Red Wings with him. But like I said, it's been the same old story with Detroit. I think it's going to come down to whether that blue line, if they're in the mix to make the playoffs, they're going to have to get a defenseman at the deadline. It's that simple. You're not going to be able to, I think, get to that playoff spot with this six that you're going to be trotting out there to begin the season. You're going to have to upgrade the blue line if you find you're in contention serious contention to at least be a playoff team. We'll see if Steve Yzerman's able to get that kind of a deal done to bring in a defenseman at the deadline. And yes, they're going to need Gibson to not only play well, but stay healthy. And like I said, that is still very much up in the air whether we see that. Great stuff. There's your look at the Detroit Red Wings for the upcoming season. Before we wrap things up, we will hear from our new smoke sponsor of the Ice Guys show, our friends at Royal Cannabis.
Royal Cannabis, where the kings and queens shop.
Check them out. Promo code Ice Guys, RoyalCannabisShop.com. This has been your Detroit Red Wings season preview video. For Alex B. Smith, I'm Ian Cameron. We hope you enjoyed the Detroit Red Wings season preview as 32 teams in 32 days rolls along, courtesy of the Ice Guys.